Chapter 897. Liang Lu, Luo Nan muttered this name, muddle-headedly becoming an eliminated person. He walked out of the testing grounds, giving off the feeling of a walking corpse. At this time, every soldier's standard AI automatically accepted a new mission. It controlled the combat suit and connected to the omnipresent magnetic rails within the base. This allowed Luo Nan to advance towards the target area without touching the ground. Explosions rumbled from time to time, assaulting back and forth. Some of the waves were extremely heavy, so much so that the entire passageway would sway with an earthquake-like impact. This caused Luo Nan and the surrounding soldiers to sway from side to side. Fortunately, the magnetic rails maintained their basic stability. No one was injured. It was just that within the vision of Luo Nan's left eye, the new mission provided a simplified map of the base. The surrounding routes were endlessly smeared with red signifying malfunctions. Some were directly erased, so much so that the already planned and established routes were adjusted once. Such a change reminded Luo Nan that the game scene he was in was indeed a dangerous zone. At the same time, the scene before his eyes seemed to have already exceeded the scope of a normal dream, fantasy, and simple data splicing. There existed an internal logic that seemed to be real. Luo Nan was unable to distinguish it clearly. Questions constantly lingered in Luo Nan's mind. As he walked through the strict laws and the depths of the wartime base, the corresponding puzzlement continued to proliferate endlessly. Of course, there were also some small and exquisite doubts that were conveniently solved. This should be the relay station, no doubt about it. Luo Nan's thoughts were corroborated by the base's simplified map after the new mission was activated. The relay station that the stern-faced Sergeant Major spoke of was most likely the same as the one Luo Nan's thoughts were referring to. This was also the test location where Luo Nan needed to repair and upgrade his defensive barrier during his offline testing. Luo Nan hated that he couldn't swallow and digest the structural diagram of this base and the test location. It could be said that he had a deep memory, so he was able to recognize it very quickly. But there was still the same question. Was this a borrowing of existing data, or, Luo Nan really wanted to pull out the virtual brain system and orient it to the lamination interference technology section? He wanted to find the author column and compare it with the target character marked on the new mission. He wanted to see if this Liang Lu and that Liang Lu were the same person. Yes, there were many people with the same name in this world. Just speaking of Luo Nan alone, there were probably hundreds or thousands of people on Earth who shared the same name as him. If the scope was placed in the vaster civilized world, then Luo Nan wouldn't be considered to be anything special. What Luo Nan truly paid attention to was the operational logic of the Innerverse simulator, as well as the nature and depth of the data it utilized. The time for Luo Nan's imagination to run wild passed by. Luo Nan's game character had already followed the established rules. He ended the short-distance movement and arrived at the location marked by the new mission. This place had a name that was very demoralizing to young people, Second Logistics Support Area. At the very least, this was the result of Luo Nan's Primal Chaos translation. But in reality, Luo Nan saw the scene with his own eyes. It was so busy and clamorous that it made one's brain boil. After checking his identity and passing through the interdistrict passageway, a buzzing sound that was like a swarm of bees entered his ears. Luo Nan really did see a swarm of bees. There were countless floating individuals, including soldiers like him, and all sorts of mechanical constructs. They shuttled back and forth within the enormous complex space that clearly had divisions. They were like worker bees bustling about inside and outside a hive. This space itself was undoubtedly a beehive. There was indeed a hemispherical beehive building that was pieced together from countless hexagonal blocks in the central region. It was just a visible part of the material plane. Inside and below it, there existed various regions of the relay station, including a complex network of pipes that connected to the core. At the same time, it was a complex creation that was interlaced and stitched together by the local spacetime and spatial faults. There was astonishing energy being transmitted and exchanged in all sorts of forms at every moment. Similarly, it also required an astonishing amount of personnel and machinery to carry out maintenance and adjustments. Luo Nan already knew about the former when he took the exam. As for the latter part, it was a concept that he had just formed. It was also at this time that Luo Nan's consciousness unavoidably pulled away from the game mode and the exam scene. He merged into this more personal experience. He was certain, even though this was a virtual scene, it was clearly filled with flesh and blood. Luo Nan raised his head, lowered it, and turned his head over and over again. It was too much for his eyes to take in. He also knew that there were at least 3 other similar beehive nodes within the relay station. This included a backup energy unit. Luo Nan's design of the enchantment started here when he was offline for testing. Well, speaking of the current structure, Luo Nan's mind didn't stop. He had already set up his combat suit to carry him along the preset route. He soon reached the target area and removed the maglev navigation link. This was an office area built on the outskirts of the beehive node. It was called an office area, but there were all sorts of complex equipment placed inside and outside. Some of them were still processing or printing objects with a hissing sound. Correspondingly, there were many kinds of virtual scenes erected in great numbers. Colorful rays of light interweaved together, and human figures flickered back and forth. It was so dazzling that it made one's eyes pop out. There were also clamoring shouts that were hard to hear outside. Rather than calling it an exchange of commands, it felt more like the venting of emotions. Luo Nan knew from this that the people running around inside were deeply immersed in battlefield mode. Their emotions were extremely tense. It was probably due to this empathy that Luo Nan and his game character subconsciously sucked in a breath of air. Only then did they continue walking inside. No one paid attention to this pawn with access privileges. Luo Nan walked all the way to the center of the area. He found an extremely recognizable voice amidst the rumbling noises. Hui District Node 77. You guys still have the time to debug a core component failure. Switch. Earth wave orbit. Did the 4th team all die there? Move towards the bottom. Don't mention robots to me. I'm using you guys to fill in the trenches. Point 22. The data package has been sent over. Expand accordingly. Don't make a single mistake. Luo Nan followed the voice and soon discovered a person in the middle of dispatching tasks. This was a 3-meter-tall giant. His skin was a bit gray. He couldn't be considered outstanding in this place, but his voice was exceptionally loud and clear. It was eye-catching. Could this be Liang Lu? Luo Nan really admired this person. He could see that the tasks this person was repeatedly dispatching were only an extremely small portion of the tasks at hand. The majority of the tasks had long since been handled through his fingers and even his thoughts. If this was all there was to it, then artificial intelligence could do it as well. It might even be more efficient. But from the current situation, this person wasn't just distributing tasks. More importantly, he was giving technical guidance to the maintenance personnel on the front lines. Even though there were a few superfluous words and idle chatter within the emotional clamor, every sentence was straightforward and efficient. The direction was clear. It made people feel that if they did as he said, they wouldn't go wrong. Looking at the feedback, this was indeed the case. In this way, what level of parallel processing did the brain have to reach? What level of technical expertise did one have to reach in order to have this kind of ability? Luo Nan noticed this person, and this person also noticed him. This person's bloodshot eyes stared over. You're standing here. Are you preparing to take a funeral photo? Luo Nan's game character stood at attention. I am Liang Lu, this is your soldier. Take him away. Ha! Luo Nan's mind flickered, and a tall and skinny person scuttled out from the side. He was approximately 190 centimeters tall, and he wore some sort of goggle-like observation device. Only half of his face was exposed. His skin was quite white, but his lips were pursed. He had an extremely capable and serious appearance. "Yes, field officer. Newbie, follow me." Unfortunately, he stuttered, and the remaining half of his white face turned red in an instant. Luo Nan. Chapter 898. In any case, Luo Nan had already found Officer Liang Lu, the target of the mission. It seemed that Liang Lu wasn't too difficult to get along with. Actually, Luo Nan didn't really understand why the sergeant major had sent him here before. But the officer who gave the orders seemed to be of a higher rank and had already made arrangements. Luo Nan was happy to continue following the plot. He wanted to see what sort of arrangements the Innerverse editor or his own subconscious would make. Luo Nan glanced at the proficient officer once more. He obtained the officer's name from the auxiliary AI, Xingzhan. This name was quite odd, but he really was a capable character. "Newbie, keep up. If you don't want to take the long way around, we need to hurry." The AI received a message broadcast just in time with Liang Lu's reminder: the interruption station has entered level 1 war mode. The power supply to non-essential areas will be cut off. The soldier's corridor will be shut down in 30 breaths. The auxiliary magnetic rails will be shut down in 120 breaths. Luo Nan knew that the breath was the basic unit of time in this interstellar civilization. It was roughly 5 times the Earth's standard second. 30 breaths was around 2.5 minutes. Liang Lu said, "The officer has already made arrangements. We'll be returning to the 2 Hives room to conduct your induction training there. If we can enter Tunnel 3 within 10 breaths, we can save around 70 breaths. We'll even have a bit more time to familiarize ourselves with the business." Luo Nan's game character gave a proper salute. "Yes, Officer Liang Lu." Liang Lu was quite satisfied with Luo Nan's response, but he didn't maintain his arrogance towards the end. The corner of his lips perked up. "There's no need to address me so formally. I'm not an officer or a noble. I'm just a rank 2 officer right now. I've only been in the military for 50 weeks. He took off the goggles on his face as he spoke, revealing a delicate and pretty but ordinary face and a pair of pure black pupils. There was practically no difference between him and a normal Earthling. Luo Nan still didn't know whether this was the result of the data splicing or if Liang Lu was like this in the first place. He didn't waste his time thinking about this. Instead, he researched and converted the 2 different time units. The extraterrestrial civilization he currently resided in used a concise decimal system for time units. Apart from the basic breath, which he didn't know the basis of, the minute, hour, day, week, quarter, year, and other scales were all in decimal scale. Of course, Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to care about those proper nouns. These units were the result of crude translation. Some didn't actually have that meaning. They were just forcefully corresponded for the sake of neatness. Chapter 899. Luo Nan's eyes widened as he observed. He was thinking to himself whether or not the simulator had begun a certain storyline. But Liang Lu didn't say anything until the end of the communication. He just made a few settings on the metal wall beside him, and the flashing red light in the surrounding area quieted down. "Officer Liang Lu. I told you not to be too formal. You can call me Officer or Liang Lu." Liang Lu revealed a smile once more, but his brows weren't as bright as before. Luo Nan asked him, "Is there a mission?" "Lieutenant Officer Shao has also been hit. He's next door. This time the internal maintenance of the hive will be troublesome. Luckily, it's not the front lines. Hit? This isn't something we can handle. But don't worry. Lieutenant Officer Sheng will be back soon." Liang Lu responded, but soon his face turned serious again. "Relax. You need to concentrate. The military isn't a place to satisfy curiosity. Time is tight right now, and opportunities are hard to come by. You can't just casually fool around. Yes, officer. Luo Nan's game character had a proper attitude. Liang Lu was very satisfied with this. He continued to introduce their future working environment. Don't look at how few living people can be seen here. This is the operating axis and data center of the entire relay station. From the basic construction, pipeline paving, energy conversion, surrounding terrain, and even space-time structure. There are also the designs of various modules, vehicles, and armor. All the basic information is here. With this, you can theoretically build a relay station from scratch and make it operate independently. It can be said that with the land in hand, I have the base. Was the plot arrangement of the simulator this rough? Luo Nan suspected that the simulator of the inner verse was making some sort of secret peace with his subconscious. That was why the simulator was able to lean the game plot in this direction. Of course, Luo Nan wouldn't refuse this. It was true that he had seen a portion of the blueprints during offline testing, but it would naturally be better if he had the chance to review and compare. Liang Lu raised his eyebrows when he saw Luo Nan in a daze. Do you feel that the quantity is too large and that it's hard to do? It's actually very simple. For someone like you who has a foundation in configuration design, you just need to familiarize yourself with the blueprints and practice. Your level will rise very quickly. Once you're familiar with it, you can assist Lieutenant Officer Sheng. Of course, it's just running errands for now. Everyone has to pass this hurdle. Yes. Luo Nan's game character was still the template of an outstanding soldier. He answered in a straightforward and efficient manner. Liang Lu, on the other hand, found it hard to stop the moment he opened his mouth. Yes, the current situation is a bit more serious than usual. As you can see, we're being attacked by the servant army outside. The damage rate of all kinds of equipment is very high, and the pressure is great. At the same time, we have to eliminate the negative effects of a certain arrogant fellow as soon as possible. You have to be prepared to shed a layer of skin. Luo Nan had already heard Liang Lu mention a certain conceited fellow twice. It was hard not to be curious. He forgot that he had just been warned and subconsciously asked, "Who is that?" It was obvious that Liang Lu was just putting on a show earlier, but he had forgotten all about it right now. Overwhelmed by his emotions, he put on an obvious muscle movement and said, "The guy who came to help repair the defense arrays without bothering about compatibility at all and left a pile of sh*t behind." Why does it sound so familiar? Liang Lu soon shook his head. This problem isn't something you can touch right now. Trouble can't be solved just by talking about it. Right now, we're going to do the preliminary work. Speaking of which, you haven't implanted a dynamo core before, right? Liang Lu answered his own question, probably not. You're so young. But we're going to do a similar operation in a bit. Relax, it's a temporary external model. Liang Lu walked forward as he spoke, and Luo Nan followed behind him. But his train of thought was a bit disjointed. Wasn't it good to implant a dynamo core? Luo Nan felt that there was a lot of information involved, even though it was clearly a normal conversation. He could only do his best to digest it. And at this time, he heard Liang Lu's drawn-out voice. War makes everyone pay a price, but the Empire won't easily ruin the future of the young. Even if this era isn't friendly to us. Luo Nan couldn't see Liang Lu's face right now, but he could feel Liang Lu's suddenly depressed mood. He didn't know how to respond for a time. Liang Lu's voice continued. A psychic talent. It's a pity that you didn't live in the Zhanhe era, right? I often think this way as well. In this era, the Heaven Abyss spirit network of the Hongguang galaxy is practically warped and polluted to the point of extinction. It's completely supported by the Jade Crystal Array. If you leave its coverage, you'll choke to death with a mouthful of poison. But the outside isn't much better. The cloaks of the gods crisscrossed and covered me. I don't even have the space to breathe. The only way is to crawl under their feet like a dog. Rather than that, I'd rather take poison every day. Luo Nan still didn't know how to respond. He couldn't help but think of Her Majesty Empress Wu's judgment at this time. He combined the two together, and his mind became a bit suspicious. It was unknown how many times these thoughts came to mind, but they struck his nerves once more. Was everything that happened before his eyes what he thought about during the day, what he dreamed of at night, or was it reality in a certain sense? Luo Nan unconsciously chewed on those words. The psychic side has no future. Why are you so dejected? Some words can just be ridiculed a few times. How can you take them seriously? Liang Lu slapped Luo Nan's shoulder. He deliberately put on a show. Colonel Xing is also on the psychic side, but he's still a first-rate teacher. He's a master in both configuration and deployment. His Highness praises him. If it weren't for war, you wouldn't be able to work under him just by passing the general education exam. You'd have to be a specialized cultivator at the very least. What's more, the heavenly stairway students taught by him can form a platoon. Liang Lu rambled on about how much he admired Colonel Xing. Then he brought Luo Nan to the so-called Dynamo Core Debugging and Installation Department. This place was pieced together from the basic worker bee grid. According to Liang Lu's introduction, the worker bee grid was the most important basic structure of the hive nodes. It was a relatively independent module that could be pieced together at will. There were over 44,000 of them, and the vast majority of them operated automatically under the control of the core intelligence. Even in wartime, they only needed 100 people to maintain them. However, because of the godly operation of that self-righteous fellow, the operating pressure of the second hive node, as well as the other two hive nodes, had increased dramatically. The logistics department had already filled in all of its manpower, but it still couldn't make ends meet. Therefore, recruits like Luo Nan, who weren't suited for the front lines and had relevant knowledge reserves, were first assigned to this department. Currently, the Dynamo Core Debugging and Installation Department was assembled from less than 10 worker bee grids. The area it occupied wasn't large, indicating that business was bleak. Luo Nan was the only customer that could be seen. Under Liang Lu's guidance, Luo Nan's head was facing downwards. He was in a special operating position, exposing the weak back of his head. Even though Luo Nan was in the game, it was hard for him to avoid awkwardness. He was simply like a criminal who was about to be beheaded. Chapter 900. Liang Lu was very familiar with matters related to the debugging and installation of the dynamo core. He gave Luo Nan a suggestion as he adjusted the machine and instruments. You must open your eyes wide. Of course, I'm not asking you to stare at me. Right now, you need to connect the auxiliary AI with the scanner. I will grant you the relevant privileges. Right now, you need to concentrate and remember the results of the scan of your body functions. The peripherals of the dynamo core are replaced quite frequently, but the state of a person's body functions are different every time. If you want to be perfect, you must do a solid job of collecting basic data. Some superficial data can be taken care of by machines, but deeper things must be grasped by oneself. A mental database must be established. Otherwise, one cannot be called a qualified creator. Yes, the words above were said by a Colonel Xing. Artisan. Was this a specialized profession? Luo Nan's mind was filled with doubts, but Liang Lu had already taken the first step to express his astonishment. You have a built-in reactor. Do you need it this early? Oh, it's a night level. Luo Nan, who was lying on the operating console, subconsciously raised his body for a moment. He controlled himself half a second later. This was the first time he had exposed himself ever since he seized this so-called night-level colonizing basic biochemical reactor. He just didn't expect that this first time would be in a game setting. That's right. Based on the information and data he had stored and collected, the simulated game setting would not be strange. It would not be strange for his background to be completely emptied out. He was just scaring himself. Plus, the mode of chaos simulation seemed to naturally be able to rationalize all factors. Liang Lu quickly found a reason for this situation. The structure is relatively new, but it's a defective product. Where did you get it from? Is it legal? Have you registered it yet? Yes, it even has a built-in layout function. Electromagnetic direction. Liang Lu found a registration entry that even Luo Nan didn't know about. He went, "Oh my," twice, his mood fluctuating. Speaking of which, you're quite wealthy. You're a night level. Even if it's a damaged night level, it's still a night level. There are only 2 Spire nobles and 10 titled nobles in this base. Luo Nan's game character responded, equipment and title are different. It's different. But for equipment to sink to this level really makes people jealous. Logically speaking, without the strength of the celestial stairway, or an endogenous spirit core, it would be impossible to activate it. That's right, you're only using it as an auxiliary equipment to be activated by external devices. What a waste of God's gift, what a waste of God's gift. Liang Lu had long forgotten what she was supposed to do. She looked at the structure and data of the night-level biochemical furnace on the scanner. She was both envious and jealous. She clicked her tongue in wonder. She hated that she could not turn Luo Nan over and properly dissect and research the region of Luo Nan's cloak. In the end, Luo Nan had to remind him, "Master Liang Lu, the dynamo core." However, Liang Lu even had the thought of giving up halfway. If I still implant an ordinary dynamo core with a night-grade reactor, then that would be a real waste of God's gift. Liang Lu was, after all, a cultured person. He quickly realized his unprofessional behavior and coughed twice. In the end, he still could not help but say, "I'm sorry, these words might not be very appropriate. Can I take a photo as a souvenir? I mean, can we keep the image of the structure and do some follow-up research?" Of course. Luo Nan still hasn't figured it out. It was unclear whether or not the Liang Lu before his eyes was a product pieced together from information. But he always felt that the night-level endogenous basic biochemical reactor and other alien civilization creations that he had received had some sort of property relationship with the higher life forms of this civilization, especially those that were related to Earth. As long as the other party had good intentions, he did not mind returning the object to its rightful owner in this manner. Liang Lu did not know of Luo Nan's evaluation criteria, but he was overjoyed by Luo Nan's permission. After obtaining Luo Nan's permission once more, he downloaded all the information related to the reactor from the scanner. Then he patted his chest and said, "I will definitely research it properly. I will not fail you. I will strive to restore this treasure to its original state as soon as possible." "I didn't entrust it to you." Luo Nan was speechless for a time. And the recruit before his eyes was already full of motivation. He operated the surrounding instruments and equipment with more than double the enthusiasm. The words that came out of his mouth were 10 times more than before. "I still believe that it will be very hard for an ordinary peripheral dynamo core to display the potential of your night-level reactor. But right now, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you really can operate this reactor, then Sergeant Major Mail will most likely enlist you into the frontline defense force. Speaking of which, if you have the support of an external device, how long can you last? With the external neuron, why would he need any external devices? It was just that the structure of the electromagnetic muscle membrane wasn't up to par. The material craftsmanship wasn't up to standard. Luo Nan had consulted Dean 1 on this topic, but there was no response for the time being. Luo Nan used the average time taken in combat to respond, 20 seconds. He originally wanted to say a minute and a half, but he changed it to the unit of time here when the words were on the tip of his tongue. Liang Lu laughed, taking this as an expression of Luo Nan's stubbornness. Liang Lu consoled him with good intentions. With your current level of ability, 10 seconds is already quite amazing. However, on the battlefield, a 10-second burst of power is meaningless. Unless you're a suicide squad, the commanding officers still need everyone to have a sustained and stable output. You coming here was the correct choice. Laying out the electromagnetic field was very popular in the beehive. Also, don't rely too much on external objects. It's not that I'm being sour, but it's a bit too early for you to have an internalized reactor. Looking at the state of your body, your internal cultivation is already quite solid. Even if you haven't reached the stage of laying out the technique, why haven't you done the step of forming the furnace? No matter how amazing the night-level reactor is, it's still an external device. Only with your own foundation can you have it. Forming the furnace, Luo Nan barely managed to ask what the forming the furnace laying technique was. Luckily, Liang Lu had already sorted out his logic by now. He clapped his hands and apologized over and over. I almost forgot that you're a member of the 100-year sequence. You haven't achieved racial gene pool optimization yet. It's hard to avoid wasting a period of time. Speaking of which, how long has it been since you guys entered the 100-year sequence? Luo Nan nearly stumbled with this question. Luckily, Liang Lu directly went to search for information at this time. Luo Nan didn't know where Liang Lu got this information from, but he sighed with regret, only 30 years. In other words, there's still 3 or 4 generations of time. It's not easy. The 30 years Liang Lu spoke of was obviously referring to the units here. Converted to Earth time, it was around 50 years. From the perspective of Earth, the so-called 100-year sequence was the 150-year sequence. And this 30 years already covered the entire process from the era of distortion to the present age. Oh, the 30 years given by the simulator. Was this the standard? Luo Nan didn't understand half of it. He couldn't help but ask, do we have to endure for 100 years? Liang Lu sighed, laying out the technique like a pass, piling up corpses like a mountain. These aren't just words. It's extremely difficult to break through the inherent logic of genetic evolution. It requires the correct direction of evolution, a perfect research system of genetic science, a powerful social mobilization force, and an extremely bitter sacrifice, including life and morality. No one is willing to pay such a great sacrifice. But if we want to surmount the natural danger of racial evolution, we must do so. It was still the same tune, but the metallic texture of the singer's voice was like a sharp blade that cleaved open the wild winds of the wilderness. It dominated the entire melody. Liang Lu clenched his fists tightly amidst the song. The crimson will rift. The demon eye of deep space. We are going to break through that place and seal off the greatest spreading grounds of evil poison. We are going to break through the shackles of the godly kingdom of the heavens. We are going to reorganize our territory and restore our glory. When that time comes, Miss C won't need to drift about amidst the flames of war. When that time comes. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He admitted that this song was very ear-grabbing, but where were Liang Lu's emotions and emotions reflected? Chapter 901. Unknowingly, Luo Nan and Liang Lu's conversation had seriously deviated from the main topic. Perhaps this had achieved Liang Lu's goal of calming his mind. Luo Nan just felt that he needed to save his extremely poor common sense in this game. Is this what the lyrics say? That Miss C isn't a citizen of the Empire. Liang Lu's mouth was a bit loose, but he had cultivated himself well. His temper had always been good. But right now, his fair face was covered in a layer of frost. How is Miss C not a citizen of the Empire? Those things outside are like crumbs. Just by gathering them together and signing a piece of scrap paper, you call it the Star Alliance. Those are the starfields and territories of the Empire. Sooner or later, we will take them back. Ah, I'm sorry. I misspoke. How could Luo Nan not know? He had accidentally poked a sensitive political issue. He felt wronged, but he saw that Liang Lu was a bit angry, so he quickly apologized. But in the end, he couldn't help but say, I really didn't understand the lyrics. Liang Lu blinked and finally reacted. He couldn't be bothered to be angry right now. Instead, he drew in a cold breath. No way. You don't know Miss Sui, Wei Sui. I know you're an eccentric, but this degree of eccentricity is too much. I'm really sorry that you found out. It was very clear that Luo Nan's lack of common sense had already broken through the lower limits of Liang Lu's heart, even though this was a chaotic game setting. It was to the point that Liang Lu gasped in amazement, though you're a naturalized seed, a genius of a race, I still have to say. You've betrayed your basic rights, soldier. The 4 studies and 20 subjects of generic knowledge are treasured texts of the experiences and theories of the ancients. They are the true seeds of the destiny stairway. They are scattered in the 100-year sequence. As far as I know, none of the known civilizations are promoting the 100-year sequence as the Imperium is doing. All of them are promoting the exploitation of the people in the name of ethnic specialties, raising a bunch of bonsai and parasitic maggots. You must cherish the comparison. Also, you need to learn a bit of literary and historical knowledge. Historical identity, political acumen, humanistic view of the universe. Even if you miss out on some subjects, you can't miss out on questions of principle. Liang Lu used a lot of tone words to emphasize his emotions, making Luo Nan feel more and more embarrassed. Luo Nan could only respond repeatedly, expressing that he would make up for it properly from now on. Seeing Luo Nan's sincere attitude, Liang Lu no longer refused to let the matter go. He began to impart knowledge to Luo Nan. Speaking of which, this song is sung in the language of Rainbow Realm, where Miss Sui comes from. That is a small race that has attached itself to the empire for a long time. Their language doesn't belong to the ceremonial ancient character system. There are very, very few people who understand the language of Rainbow Realm. Sacrificial ancient characters? Luo Nan encountered yet another term that he did not understand, but it really wasn't good to break through Liang Lu's lower limit of knowledge. He could only hide it deep within his heart and vow to flip through the virtual brain system to make up for it later. Thus, he could only converse awkwardly. Is there no translation for this language? Nope. Everyone can only rely on some translation software to decipher it. The translation is choppy, and it loses the beauty that it should have. What a pity. Translation software, the semantic problem of the lyrics was solved, but Luo Nan was truly baffled. Why did you use such an uncommon language? The lyrics are also very important. Miss Sui naturally has her own considerations. Yes, there are many. For example, she was forced by the political pressure of the Star Alliance. She was forced by those senseless civil organizations. She was forced by the Pantheon Temple. But I know that Miss Sui only did this out of artistic considerations. She considered her heart. Only in this way can there be such a natural beauty. It was very hard for Luo Nan to bicker with a brainless fan about this sort of thing. Plus, he was more interested in the fragments of information that Liang Lu spoke of about the Star Alliance and the Pantheon Temple. Even though the game's scene was bound to be limited, the scene was supported by a rich and heavy torrent of information. What Luo Nan needed to do right now was to strip clear clues from within and summarize the general outline. The song named Crimson Wool had already entered its second cycle. It returned to its earliest soothing melody that was close to a cappella. Liang Lu bent over under this melody. He subconsciously lowered his voice. Of course, there's another theory. Miss Sui specifically used such an uncommon language to write the lyrics. She actually did this to conceal the part she wrote for Her Highness. Confused face. Luo Nan probably failed in managing his expression, but Liang Lu suddenly became alert. He hurriedly straightened his waist and confessed in a loud voice. Cough. I'm just saying. Her Highness is one with the Empire. It's not a big deal to write it for her. Besides, even if that's the case, I won't give up so easily. What the heck? Luo Nan felt quite powerless. He would rather this minister Liang Lu return to the reserved attitude he had in the beginning. Liang Lu didn't know Luo Nan's thoughts. He just borrowed this momentum to set down terms for Luo Nan. You must be familiar with Miss Su Yi's songs while working in the 2 Hive. I'm also extremely supportive of being promoted to a colonel. I have a debut album, a second album, and a worldwide recording version. I'm currently waiting for my 3rd album. I can lend it to you for now, but you must take good care of it during the loan period. Luo Nan didn't understand what a worldwide recording version was, but he didn't have the strength to ask. From his perspective, it was fine to just listen to good songs. He would vomit if he listened to familiar songs. But it wouldn't be good to refuse in person. It would be fine if he rejected the other's good intentions, but if he were to be accused of looking down on his idol, only the heavens knew whether or not this brainless fan would stab him with a karate chop. It must be known that Luo Nan was still lying on the operating seat with the back of his head exposed. Luckily, Liang Lu possessed the basic qualities of a soldier, even though he was a chatterbox and liked to add drama to himself. He received a boost of motivation from Miss Su Yi's singing, so he didn't delay his business. Then, he quickly and efficiently equipped Luo Nan with a more suitable external dynamo core. It was called the vertical collar. This external dynamo core had a shape similar to the collar of a combat suit. In fact, it was bound together with the combat suit. It was quite large in size, and its integration was a bit lacking. However, there were many convenient external tools that connected it to the host's nervous system through simulated neurons attached to the back of the brain. It could realize many functions, and it was very suitable for a rookie maintenance soldier like Luo Nan. It was called an external device, but in reality, it had undergone a small neurosurgery to realize the connection of nerve signals. According to Liang Lu's words, it was on the hair transplant level. Luo Nan was considering whether or not he could use the external neuron to replace it. Thinking about this was a bit far off. Luo Nan began to slowly familiarize himself with the practical operation of the vertical collar under Liang Lu's introduction and guidance. Liang Lu really did have the qualifications to be reserved in the professional field. He explained in detail, and his points were clear. He also had a considerable amount of practical experience. When he first entered the army, his first external dynamo core was also the vertical collar. God! It was only after 20 weeks of abyss time that he made a replacement upgrade under the suggestion of Colonel Xingzhan. He spoke to Luo Nan like this: this level of control of the dynamo core is idiot-like. You don't need to put any effort into it. Your thoughts need to transcend the specific equipment and facilities and rise to the level of configuration. This is why the logistics department and the maintenance department are fighting over people who specialize in configuration. Come. Let's go through the basics once. The practical task that Liang Lu arranged for Luo Nan was very simple. He just had Luo Nan read the instruction manual once. Then he would control the operating position and complete the final debugging. Liang Lu's reasoning for this was, don't look at how peaceful the hive is right now. A week ago when the barrier went out of control, the servant army broke through twice in a row. The hive was nearly wiped out. I'm absolutely not praising that self-righteous fellow. We need to be prepared for danger in times of peace, right? That fellow is so unreliable. God knows how long his repaired barrier can last. The self-righteous fellow in Liang Lu's words could only lie on the operating position. He shut his mouth tightly and obediently executed the prescribed movements. It was indeed as Liang Lu said. The basics were very simple. Luo Nan quickly grasped the hair transplant. No, the installation and debugging method of the vertical collar dynamo core. Next time, even if he came alone, he would be able to smoothly complete the relevant work. The fixed ring on the operating position opened and Luo Nan let out a breath. Right when he was about to get rid of this slightly awkward position, he suddenly heard Liang Lu shout, "Hold on." Liang Lu placed his hand on Luo Nan's shoulder as he spoke. He then spoke with an extremely serious tone. His target was not Luo Nan, but Colonel Xing, who was still in the command room. "Yes, Colonel." "Understood. All implants, the installation of peripherals, temporarily. Liang Lu had already lost his composure a bit. Luckily, he was able to adjust himself in the next moment. He looked at the time display and spoke with an even graver tone, reporting to the officer. 2 minutes ago, I already performed the surgery to install the peripheral dynamo core for Private Luo Nan. He then reported an even more accurate time, as well as the worker bee grid and the machine's code. There was no immediate response from the other side. Instead, a clear projection appeared before Luo Nan's eyes a few seconds later. The gray-skinned giant, Colonel Xing, sat behind a flickering workbench of all colors. His bloodshot pupils shifted over. Luo Nan could obviously guess that there was a huge problem with the installation equipment, the system, or the usage of the dynamo core. If this was the real world, he would probably be nervous. Right now, he really was a bit nervous. His game character subconsciously struggled free from Liang Lu's pressing palm. He stood up from the operating position and stood straight. "Colonel. There's no need to be nervous." Colonel Xingzhan's tone was a bit gentler than before, but it was still cold and detached. He didn't explain the problem to Luo Nan. He just said, "There will always be accidents on the battlefield. Old soldiers endure accidents and still have to do things. Recruit. Learn how to do things if you're faking it." Luo Nan's game character was quite straightforward. He responded in a loud voice, "Yes, Colonel." Colonel Xingzhan's gaze turned to Liang Lu. "You're the one who brought him. You'll be responsible to the end. He'll follow you wherever you go. If there's a problem, deal with it at the first instant. At the same time, report it to me." Liang Lu's fair face was a bit flushed, but he responded with an even louder voice without the slightest hesitation, "Yes, Colonel." Chapter 902. Luo Nan began his career as a maintenance soldier in Beehive Relay Station 2 the moment the order to be promoted to colonel was issued. Officer Liang Lu became his direct superior. He taught Luo Nan how to maintain and repair all the equipment, instruments, pipelines, and even building structures in Beehive 2. They were currently in the middle of a war, and he was affected by the negative buff of a certain opinionated fellow. The related work intensity was extremely high. Even a pure rookie recruit like Luo Nan had a large amount of piecemeal work to do. Compared to the chatting stage before the dynamo core was implanted, the current Luo Nan was like a spinning top being whipped. He couldn't rest for even a moment. If he were to use game standards to measure this, then this would probably be the type of masochistic work of a small pantheon god with an extremely strong sense of immersion but extremely bad gaming pleasure. Luo Nan continued his gaming career. But during this process, he discovered that he had to face two problems that had nothing to do with the main storyline of the game or his job. The first problem didn't even belong to the game scene itself, but it was closely related to it. Luo Nan discovered that the amount of time he spent in the game scene was a bit excessive. An excessive deviation. A person's subjective perception of time was quite vague. Sleep, relaxation, concentration, high-pressure work, boring repetitions, and various other scenes were all different. Some seconds felt like years, while others passed in the blink of an eye. But in any case, people were able to quickly adjust to a publicly accepted standard by relying on timekeeping tools. But Luo Nan was facing a problem right now. He felt that a long time had passed in the game scene. The base's public timer, personal auxiliary AI, and even Liang Lu and Colonel Xing Zhan's manual verification all indicated that he had already spent 3 days in Beehive Relay Station 2. Of course, Heaven Abyss time, which adhered to the decimal system, was a bit weaker in terms of units of days. When converted to Earth time, it was around 40 hours. Even if Luo Nan calculated 40 hours, it was enough for him to fly back and forth between T-City and Ban City. The situation in the real world clearly wasn't like this. Luo Nan's mind was immersed in the game scene. He still had some basic perception of the real world. He would also react to external stimuli. At the very least, the auction was about to start. If he really pushed it to that step, whether it was Zhang Yingying on the airship or Yin Lo in Bin City, someone would definitely wake him up. Luo Nan slept very peacefully during this 40-hour interval. It was just like an ordinary nap. He closed his eyes. He did not open his eyes yet. Only his consciousness flipped in the primal chaos, shuttling back and forth in time. Aside from facing densely packed mechanical creations every day, memorizing large amounts of maintenance machinery, equipment, and infrastructure design blueprints and applying them flexibly, often following the main officer to deal with abnormal problems, and being on standby 24/7 when he had nothing to do, there were practically no other flaws. It was an extremely good post to learn and gain experience. The recruits and veterans of the logistics department, and even some sergeants and officers, might not be able to transfer here even after a few years. But it would be far too naive to think of this as Liang Lu's compensation. Liang Lu, who had not been in the military for long, was a hot-blooded youth with strong principles when it came to official matters. He recommended Luo Nan to take up the post because of Luo Nan's solid attainments in configuration, his obsession with research, and his obsessive-compulsive and strict attitude. He was the most suitable for this post. His compensation would only come from a personal level. The battle outside the relay station entered a deadlock once more, and the operational pressure of the two hive entered a period of relative stability. The two finally had the chance to chat a bit more, but they were not sitting idly with tea. They were on the way back from the end of the pipeline repair mission. This time, Liang Lu came prepared as well. The first single, the second single, and the special edition of the Champion single. These are the only ones that have been officially sold. They are all global recordings. Most of Miss Sui's works were composed by herself, and she was an independent musician after terminating her contract with her management company. She could compose as she pleased. She really couldn't be considered a high yield. There's also this. This is a passerby's camera before she officially debuted. It's really natural, without any embellishments. Unfortunately, it's just a copy. Some of the details aren't clear enough. These are all. I'll lend them to you for now. Liang Lu's resolute momentum dropped quite miserably when he said the words "lend them to you for now." However, Luo Nan was still able to feel the bitter emotions of having his flesh cut. From Liang Lu's perspective, this was indeed a very sincere compensation. After all, these were the flesh of his heart. Cutting them all off would cost him his life. Luo Nan simply didn't have the chance to refuse. This was because the two were currently riding in a specialized maintenance vehicle. They were traveling within an enormous pipeline tunnel, and Liang Lu had already placed the 2 albums and 1 singles echo box in Luo Nan's dorm room. He also gave Liang Lu a personal safe. In any case, under Liang Lu's influence, the current Luo Nan finally understood what was called a global recording edition. It was different from the lossless format that he previously understood. When Luo Nan put on a special sensor and used the vertical collar dynamo core to drive the special echo box, he listened to the passerby's sound source of Miss Plain Clothes, the only person Liang Lu brought with him. Luo Nan was actually able to feel the unique pulse within his sea of consciousness. Yes, the so-called global recording edition was actually able to record the fluctuations on the mental plane. It was stored on a special medium and played repeatedly. It was an extremely novel feeling. It should have belonged to the instantaneous state of the sea of consciousness. Through a special medium, it traversed space and time to interact with the current mental plane. Luo Nan had never thought of such a form before. And as he listened attentively, he was able to experience a unique beauty of order from within. Music was originally in order, but normal feelings were emotional. Luo Nan wasn't a particularly emotional person. To be precise, he strove to follow reason and not be that emotional. This Miss Plain-Clothed song was in the global recording edition mode. It just so happened to satisfy his bidirectional mental state. He saw the structure from his sensibility, and he touched upon his emotions from the structure. It was quite appropriate. This Miss Plain-Clothed clearly had some accomplishments on the mental side. It was said that this was just a replica version from the fan production line. It couldn't be considered a true global recording. Luo Nan didn't listen for too long during working hours, even though he had a mission gap. He soon cut off his control over the dynamo core. Liang Lu's low sensitivity, bad sound source, lack of auxiliary equipment modules, and other similar explanations and complaints rang out in his ears. After hearing so much, Luo Nan even began to agree with Liang Lu's daily nagging of going to listen to the song live no matter what. Maybe it would be more interesting if we listened to the song live. Yeah. It was rare to see Luo Nan express the same sentiments at the same time. Liang Lu slapped his thigh. It's a pity that Miss Plain-Clothed's third degree is still far from completion. Who knows how long it will take to gather enough songs for the concert. Actually, the most lively thing right now is the passerby audio source in our hands, and it just so happens that it's a copy. However, in the repeater station, there really are people who have collected the original, global recording, version. Sai, since you're a new fan, why don't we pay a visit? It's perfect for both work and personal matters. Ha! Without waiting for Luo Nan to sort out the logic, Liang Lu had already turned on the communicator. Officer Xiao, Officer Liang Lu reporting. Right now, Private Luo Nan and I are located in the central pipeline tunnel. We are 2 minutes away from Observation Station 7 by car. This was because, in the Heavenly Yuan Empire, Zhan was a national surname. To be more precise, it was the surname of the imperial family. In order to show respect to the imperial family, it was an unwritten rule to call them by their given name and not their surname. It wasn't against the law to address him incorrectly, but it was still impolite. Just as Liang Lu had said, living in the light concealment galaxy was basic social knowledge. Luo Nan's clumsy performance was tantamount to giving a vivid footnote to the negative description of a person who betrays basic rights. I'm sorry, forget it. You're so young, and your perception and design skills are so strong. Of course you have to give up something to be fair. Now it looks like you've even given up on common sense, aside from your fleshly body talent. It was unknown whether Liang Lu was consoling Luo Nan or himself. Half a second later, Liang Lu couldn't help but advise Luo Nan. When you see Zhan Xiao in a bit, try to talk as little as possible. Talk about things on a technical level. He's fine in everything else. He's loyal and devoted to Her Highness, and he's sincere to Miss Sui. However, his thoughts are still from before calamity. He's very sensitive to some things. Ha! It must be said that Liang Lu's considerations were extremely thorough, but there were always unexpected things in this world. This was true even in a game setting. Luo Nan had traveled more than half the distance. The tunnel leading to the observation station was already in sight when the patrol detection system sounded an alarm. It interrupted Liang Lu's painstaking and well-intentioned arrangements. The red light flickered, disturbing the monotonous and stable lighting environment of the pipeline tunnel. Luo Nan and Liang Lu glanced at each other. They didn't say anything. The back of the dedicated maintenance vehicle had already opened. Luo Nan's vertical collar dynamo core controlled 4 probing balls in a row. They floated soundlessly in the air, and the probing rays, sound waves, and electromagnetic waves were released in a crisscrossed manner. They advanced toward the suspected area indicated by the system. The 4 probing spheres formed a special detection array between each other. It was beneficial to Luo Nan's soul strength, and it provided protection in the opposite direction. It was like a powerful flashlight, gathering highly concentrated and extremely sensitive probing psychic waves toward the suspected area of darkness. That's right. It was a flashlight. Ever since Luo Nan realized the external release of his mental senses, he had always been the all-encompassing and omniscient representative on Earth. He had a 360-degree observation angle with no blind spots. He had few misgivings, and he could rampage as he pleased. Looking at the current situation, do you think it's a phantom or sin poison? How are you going to deal with it? Strangely enough, Luo Nan was able to keep up with Liang Lu's pace when the question really came to his head. His bitter training in the drill manual and his memorization of the rules and regulations were effective. He muttered to himself for a bit before replying calmly, "No matter what it is, it needs to be dealt with in a way that deals with sin poison. If it were up to me, I would choose to divide the suspected parasitic region. This is because this is the only processing skill I possess. Then, I would entrench myself in place and wait for backup." In any case, from Liang Lu's point of view, this skill was most suitable for a recruit like Luo Nan. Perhaps one day he would rely on this skill to survive. He originally wanted to use this skill to test Luo Nan step by step. He wanted to mention a few things to take note of to prevent this young fellow, who lacked common sense, from losing his life in a muddle-headedness due to this matter. He never expected that not only would he fail to test Luo Nan with just a few words, he would also become Liang Lu's job. And from then on, Liang Lu was reduced to an auxiliary soldier. He gave the most technical content to Luo Nan, who had just officially taken up his post not too long ago. It looked like Luo Nan was quite confident, but Liang Lu was still a bit worried. He used the standard array to give a partial support to Luo Nan for the sake of safety. When the two were carrying out their official mission, they would follow the requirements of the drill manual. The frame of their body and soul and the corresponding energy flow would be linked through the dynamo cores. They would form the classic standard combat array of the military, which was referred to as the standard array. This was to realize the effect of 1 + 1 greater than 2. Luo Nan felt it as well. He nodded towards Liang Lu. Liang Lu indicated to the young fellow to concentrate. Luo Nan expressed that he understood, but a portion of his mind was still drifting. There was nothing he could do. Every time this happened, he couldn't help but think that the so-called standard array was simply a replica of the formatting domain. However, the formatting domain was more unbridled in its application on the mental plane. The standard array, on the other hand, required more flexibility in terms of personnel requirements. It had a variety of split and merge structures, and its core was more rigorous and thorough. It was the result of repeated tempering. After exiting the game, he should be able to refer to the standard array and properly study Captain Jimmy's state. Part of Luo Nan's mind was diverted, but it was more than enough to deal with the several hundred centimeters scattered on the ground. The so-called segmentator was actually a kind of mechanical crawler the size of a grain of rice. Following Luo Nan's control of psychic waves, its built-in microchip was activated. Amidst the rustling sounds, the egg-like chrysalis that were on standby transformed into something similar to the working form of ants. Luo Nan's thoughts changed again, and over 500 mechanical ants fought to be the first to pounce at the suspected leaking area. At first, it felt like a chaotic charge, but in the space of a breath, they formed a standard crescent-shaped formation. They were like pincers that unfolded in both directions. The encirclement range grew larger and larger, but the basic formation wasn't the slightest bit chaotic. "Beautiful," Liang Lu muttered. The so-called corpse referred to the indescribable and unimaginable remains of powerful existences that perished in the bitter struggle for ultimate authority over the heaven abyss spirit network. Of course, this also included the twisted wills of the remnant souls, the laws of destruction, the collapsed spacetime, and the gods and believers that attached themselves to them. In the end, the innumerable wreckage of corpses and dead souls became the breeding ground for the sinful poison. In the end, this terrifying poison was pushed to the regions where all life and consciousness existed. It endlessly mutated and multiplied, forming a completely new ecology under the distorted framework of the Heaven Abyss Spirit Network. Doesn't this look a bit familiar? Chapter 905. There was no doubt that the first thing Luo Nan thought of when he understood the basic concept of sin poison was the mutant infection. It was the mutant era that started on Earth 50 years ago. There were certain similarities between the external appearances of the two. Luo Nan even had the basis and space to go a step further in his association. But if he were to strictly compare the two, there were still many differences besides the similarities. Luo Nan didn't have enough knowledge to make an accurate analysis. He could only take an even more serious attitude to understand the relevant information, to study and verify it. He believed that the knowledge he learned in the game's scene would be very, very useful. The Hongguang system was once the holy land of the founding ruler of the heavenly Yuan Empire. It was the greatest and longest-lasting victim of the terrifying negative effects of sin poison. It was to the point that the era after the birth of sin poison was called the Calamity Era in history textbooks. Since the beginning of the Calamity Era, the remnant citizens of the heavenly Yuan Empire and the Hongguang system struggled to survive for several thousand years. But they were powerless to break through the curse of sin poison. Because of the existence of sin poison, many advanced civilizations in the universe took strict precautions and hid them while they were down. They were trapped in a limited star domain, watching helplessly as the enormous empire that spanned 10 billion light-years in endless spacetime crumbled. Although the Hongguang system still maintained a complete military and political system of the heavenly Yuan Empire, its strength was no longer the same as it was during the empire's heyday. The people of the Hongguang system were tormented to the point they wished they were dead. But on the other hand, they were able to persevere for such a long time and still maintain a considerable amount of strength. The imperial army of the Hongguang system was certainly the group of people in the universe most adept at dealing with sin poison. In fact, the military's tactical and technical manuals that Luo Nan had seen had detailed and targeted arrangements made in regards to the various common forms of the existence of sin poison. Through war after war, these techniques, experiences, and the crystallization of blood were instilled into the brains of every combat personnel of the Empire. As for how effective the usage was, it depended on the individual. But no matter what, any soldier of the Empire that had been in the army for more than half a year had a yardstick in their hearts. Their accuracy would vary based on the amount of experience they had. Right now, Liang Lu, Luo Nan's superior officer, was a bit uncertain. Although he believed in Luo Nan's ability to carry out the technical manuals, he still had some reservations in his heart as to how far Luo Nan could carry it out in actual combat. At this moment, they were already very close to the contaminated area that had been patched. Luo Nan had long since seen that there were quite a few people standing in this relatively narrow space. Most of them were operating instruments and equipment. They were busy, but there weren't any big shot level characters among them. Presumably, they hadn't arrived yet. The one with the highest rank was a young colonel. At the same time, he was also the one with the most leisure time. He leaned against the curved inner wall of the passageway. His back was arched inwardly, looking a bit casual. His face was lowered, making it hard to see his expression clearly. But even so, Luo Nan's first impression of him was that his body was slender and coordinated. He was quite handsome. He was an extremely eye-catching character. However, Luo Nan felt that the silver armband on his upper left arm was even more eye-catching. It was a circle of abstract spirals that represented the stairway to heaven. There was also a pattern of a half-closed eye in the middle. Just as Luo Nan was guessing who it was, Liang Lu stopped in his tracks. Zhan Xiao. The sound waves transmitted through the secondary passageway had quite a few refractions and overlaps. It was muffled and not too clear, but the young colonel was still able to sense it in an instant. He raised his head, and the corner of his lips curled up. Officer Liang Lu, your random detection frequency is a bit high. Chapter 908. Zhan Xiao was indeed a rather handsome person. At the very least, the outline of his facial features was in line with Luo Nan's Earth aesthetic standards. His eyes were brilliant, and the corners of his eyes were slightly raised. Their radiance was sharp. Even though Luo Nan was separated by nearly 20 meters, his piercing gaze was quite penetrative. In comparison, his voice seemed quite muffled within the rapidly refracting tunnel. By the time it reached Luo Nan's side, it was already buzzing. Liang Lu's expression darkened, but he didn't respond immediately. He didn't continue forward either. Instead, he turned on his communicator and conveniently sent Luo Nan into it. He was using a device that could communicate across the entire planet. He was separated by 20 meters, and he was speaking to the target personnel. His words were full of sarcasm. Officer Xiao, a problem can be found with the most basic of random sampling. What do you want me to do? At first glance, it sounded like these two were about to shed all pretense of cordiality when they spoke. However, the curve of Zhan Xiao's lips was even more obvious. He no longer paid attention to any rank. Speaking of which, you might be disappointed. I already made a will when I joined the army. Even if something happens to me, the designated beneficiary of the out-of-print sound source will be Sister Ming. It won't be your turn to have a heartless mouth like you. Liang Lu spat, don't call me Sister Ming. Her Highness may not remember a distant relative like you. Liang Lu immediately became alert after the first sentence was said. Your brain is broken. You're starting to have delusions. Speaking of which, didn't they feed you medicine? Luo Nan watched the two spit at each other from a distance, but he didn't feel too much hostility. It was just as he understood in the past. Liang Lu and Zhan Xiao's friendship was quite deep. Liang Lu's choice to use his communicator wasn't an act of taking off his pants and farting. It must be known that Zhan Xiao's current position was separated from the tunnel by the seemingly busy full-time personnel of the Jingming administration. Unless they forcefully charged through the crowd, they could only spit insults at each other. The personnel of the Jingming administration were quite quiet. They allowed Liang Lu and Zhan Xiao to spit insults at each other. They did what they needed to do. There was practically no reaction. At most, one person came over to Liang Lu and Luo Nan's side to tell them to maintain a safe distance. He also made a mark on the retina interface of the two. Through an effect similar to AR, Luo Nan could clearly see that Zhan Xiao had already drawn a prison. Zhan Xiao's range of activity was limited to a radius of several meters with Zhan Xiao as the center. Zhan Xiao was isolated from the normal world. It was precisely in this situation that Liang Lu lacked the mood to escalate the war of words. He simply introduced Luo Nan to Zhan Xiao, just like how he introduced Luo Nan to Lu Andy. It was still the same elite seed, segmentation and accuracy, and so on. Of course, the most outstanding one was still the my soldier's attribute judgment. Zhan Xiao wasn't as polite as Lu Andy. He just nodded towards Luo Nan. Luo Nan was separated by such a distance. If Luo Nan's eyes and mental senses weren't as good, he would have missed the opportunity. But this person turned around and stabbed Liang Lu in the heart. You have such a poor vocabulary to say the same words twice in a minute. Do you really know how to embarrass our Shoujing Academy? Or is this the only bright spot you have after joining the army? F***ck. It was only then that Liang Lu remembered that Colonel Shao in front of him had the blood of the royal family flowing in his veins. He was extremely talented in sensing and specialized in such things. Even in the complicated environment of the front line, 100 meters was nothing to him. Obviously, the conversation between them and Lu Andy had been heard by this fellow. Liang Lu wasn't a particularly thick-skinned person to begin with. This time, he choked quite badly and was momentarily speechless. However, Luonan felt that it was more likely that Liang Lu had met him halfway. She was worried that Zhang Zhao's words had been heard by the other party, which made it even more awkward. On the other side, Zhang Zhao was unforgiving. He glanced over and said, "Minister Liang Lu, what's with that expression? Do you feel that the evidence is conclusive, so you want to make an early judgment and deal with me before Sir Hui and the others arrive?" Liang Lu wanted to answer, but in the end, he could only curse indiscriminately. Seeing that Liang Lu was completely speechless, Zhang Zhao finally let out some of the pent-up air in his chest. His tone also lowered, and he seemed to be chatting casually. "I don't need you to worry about me." "What's the point of worrying about me? The battlefield is the most unpredictable place to begin with. It's just that there are people like Lone who have a tough life, people like you who never improve, and people like me. What's wrong with you? Did you play out the appraisal, the disposition, and the funeral in your head?" Liang Lu was finally annoyed by Zhang Zhao's words. His emotions surged, and he fiercely spat into the communicator. "You still have the face to talk about Senior Lu? 7 years ago, you evaluated him. Did you judge him correctly? 4 years ago, you wanted to seal the coffin. Did you seal it? Right now, Senior Lu is right outside. If you have the time to spout nonsense, go kowtow to him and worship him as your master. Senior Lu will definitely teach you the ability to lift a coffin." This wave of verbal abuse caused Zhang Zhao's face to turn green. He will be a cripple even if he is discharged. Humph. Luonan quickly shot a glance at Zhang Zhao. Zhang Zhao's lips held a sneer, but his gaze was a bit fleeting. Liang Lu was ruthless as well. He stabbed at Zhang Zhao's heart like an invisible knife. How did Senior Lu do it? He recovered his consciousness while he was recuperating. He had the energy to research the theories and methods of internal cultivation and internal refinement. He started from the beginning, deducing and experimenting step by step. He endured the pain of his illness for over 3 years. He risked the risk of genetic collapse at any time and overcame countless difficulties. He published over a dozen professional theses and obtained the Heaven Stairway armlet with a half-crippled body. This was much better than a certain someone who relied on his royal bloodline and his inherited treasured texts to earn glory. And in the end, he started with the external force that was implanted into the dynamo core. He guided the external force into the internal force, causing the furnace to restart and reforge. His cultivation has completely recovered, and he has even made progress. He has returned to the army and is still a great man. Even someone as fierce as Saoirse praises him. Liang Lu's voice grew louder and louder. He had nearly forgotten himself. Right at this moment, a laugh traveled into everyone's ears. "Oh my terrible reputation has spread to the 2 beehives." Chapter 909. There was a saying in the heavenly Yuan Empire that could be translated as, "The mouth moves, the ears move." On the one hand, it meant that everything that happens is connected. On the other hand, it meant that even the walls have ears. On the other hand, it meant that, speak of the devil and he will appear. Liang Lu's current situation wasn't just that his mouth and ears moved, but that his entire body moved. This was an exaggeration, but his soul was definitely trembling right now. Just as he was getting carried away, the person in charge of the review had already led his subordinates over in a grandiose manner. It had to be said that Liang Lu's earlier analysis was rather accurate. The most eye-catching person in the group was undoubtedly the sturdy giant at the front. It was Shi Yuan, a third-rank noble known as Vicious. He was half a head taller than the 3-meter-tall Colonel Xingzhan, and had practically come in from the top of the passageway. There was no need to mention his ferocious appearance. Even inside the base, he wore a layer of metal armor that extended to his face and seemed to fuse with his flesh. At this moment, a cold light pulsated as he breathed. From his appearance, he wasn't just a vicious person, he was practically a wolf in sheep's clothing. In comparison, Chang Yihui was a third-rank noble who was much more low-key. Although he walked side by side with Sir Shi Yuan, his height only reached Sir Shi Yuan's waist. Perhaps the contrast was too obvious, but he seemed thinner than a normal person. His face was long and narrow, and his eyes were small. However, Liang Lu was even more afraid of this person. It wasn't just because Sir Chang Yihui was the second in command of the logistics department, and was in charge of him. It was also because this person's surname was Chang Yi. Chang Yi was a compound surname, and was the surname of great sovereign Chang Yishuan, the one with the greatest military achievements at the founding of the empire. In the Heavenly Yuan Empire, great sovereign Chang Yishuan was also known as the Devil Buster Great Sovereign. Putting aside his great achievements before and after the founding of the nation, in the early days of the era of Sin, during the Dark Age after the fall of the Master of Zhanhe, he dragged his heavily injured body and swept across the Hongguang galaxy in the most violent and poisonous environment. He opened up the most basic living space for the survivors who were on the verge of extinction. In the hundreds of years that followed, he presided over the central area and cut off all the dark hands of the heavenly kingdoms, until he ran out of oil and returned to silence. Even after his death, the inner universe he opened up also transformed into a permanent plane, carrying the most important jade crystal array of the empire. In the light concealment galaxy, it lit up the flames of survival for the heavenly abyss survivors. Chapter 9-10. Nefarious poison contamination, low intensity. Many people didn't even need to look at the display to roughly guess the meaning of the alarm. The overall atmosphere of the team fluctuated slightly. Some people whispered to each other, but overall, it was not as chaotic as when Colonel Xingzhan arranged the teaching display board. After all, everyone was already used to it. In the frontline bases that were engulfed in the flames of war and people were dying all the time, how could they expect the air to be clean and dust-free? Luo Nan was the most unaccustomed to this. According to the drill manual he had learned, he should be dealing with it now. However, no one moved at all, including the professionals from the Ming establishment. Everybody's eyes were wandering on the teaching board and the faces of the big shots, trying to find the key to the current situation. It must be said that Luo Nan already had a grasp of the situation and judgment in his mind. His understanding of the situation had already surpassed the vast majority of people present. Unfortunately, he was limited by his pitiful mathematical knowledge. Of course, there was a gap in the overall knowledge structure. Looking at these display boards was like reading a book from heaven. Even the most blunt inference method could not find any logical clues from them. For a moment, he was extremely vexed. On the other hand, Liang Lu, who was next to Luo Nan, was awakened from his stupefied state by this wave of alarm. He was barely able to shake off the shame of receiving a bad evaluation. He was unable to calm his heart and observe the display board for the time being. In his days, he only received the most stimulating information from the outside world. He even subconsciously looked for Luo Nan to converse. This alarm sounds familiar, Luo Nan grunted softly. His gaze struggled free from the display board. He shifted his gaze along with Liang Lu to point at the alarm device. It was a piece of detection equipment placed beside the isolated area by the Netherworld Agency. Its working principle was the same as the detection module on the specialized maintenance vehicle, and the basic conclusion it obtained at this moment didn't seem to be any different. Really? Liang Lu was horrified. This area had clearly already been handled by him and Luo Nan. However, the warning this time was so similar that it was as if they had gone back in time. Didn't that mean that their previous work didn't work? Liang Lu's little heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to look at Luo Nan, but his scalp went numb before he could make eye contact with Luo Nan. He subconsciously turned his head, and he just so happened to meet Xingzhan's large, bloodshot eyes. Liang Lu's heart was flustered, and his reaction was also wooden. Fortunately, Xingzhan only swept a glance over him, and Liang Lu didn't even catch the focus of his gaze. Then, Xingzhan said, "It's still the worker bee area 3321 to 3328, the low permeability type. The standard operation is divided into 17-05. The log shows that the last operation of Central Dimension 2 Patrol is in line with the program. The so-called Central Yenwei Patrol 2 was the abbreviation for the Central Pipeline and Safety Partition Area Extension Department Maintenance Post Patrol 2. In other words, it referred to the two people, Liang Lu and Luo Nan." In Xingzhan's mouth, the work log that Liang Lu had painstakingly organized was skipped over by this sentence. As for the more detailed part, it would probably occupy an inconspicuous corner of the complex data model that was currently ascending and descending. It might even be just one of the series of basic data. Even so, Liang Lu was very satisfied. No matter how small the positive feedback was, it was still positive. The impact of the negative reviews from before quietly dissipated a little. Luo Nan, who was next to him, could hear Luo Nan clearly. However, Luo Nan didn't pay too much attention to Liang Lu's mental state. He just stared blankly as he looked at the dense arrangement of teaching boards at the front of the line. He looked at the flashing and refreshing formulas, numbers, and graphics. Even if he could understand them, not 1 out of 100 could understand them. Liang Lu's whisper entered his ear. That person finally began to collect his mind and study this series of highly difficult mathematical models. He soon discovered an extraordinary situation. It's constantly refreshing. It wasn't just Liang Lu. Some other people who could vaguely make out what was going on found out one after another that the teaching exhibition board, which was already extremely complicated to begin with, was constantly being refreshed. Every piece of content was being refreshed at a different frequency. Each model seemed to be performing real-time calculations to mark out a certain type of rule changes. At this time, one could guess that there was certainly some sort of hidden yet unrevealed linkage logic between each board. The vast majority of people had already given up upon realizing this point. There were also some professionals who were extremely interested in this. They didn't want to give up, and they cast their gazes one after another toward Xingzhan, who had lit up these teaching boards. They hoped that this person possessed a deep foundation in theory. He also possessed the demeanor of a master who had rich experience in teaching. He could dispel their doubts. They were destined to be disappointed. Obviously, Xingzhan didn't think that the current environment was the kind of classroom where he could explain the profound in simple terms. He didn't have the intention of giving a long lecture, including this series of demonstrations. He didn't expect most people to understand. It was enough as long as the two knights who had decision-making power could understand. The two knights had indeed understood the key information. Shi Yuan's gaze lingered on the most conspicuous timing interface in the center. He briefly summarized, periodic changes. Xingzhan confirmed, even if we deal with it now, it will appear again in 2 to 3 minutes. It should be the multiple elemental linkage of the new spacetime fortress architecture. Of course, it also includes the increase and decrease of entropy within this near-closed system. Chang Yihui thought a little more and immediately asked, where does this rhythm of evolution come from? The rules of the evil environment shouldn't reflect obvious regularity. Here. Xingzhan's finger pointed at the projection area on the left of the timer interface. The formula and numbers displayed on this projection did not seem much different from the other display boards. However, in the eyes of those who knew the ropes, it represented a very special meaning. The vast majority of the people in the surroundings could not understand it. Those who could understand it had more or less a change in expression. Luo Nan heard Liang Lu's extremely low inhalation of air between his lips and teeth before it was forcefully cut off. Shi Yuan and Chang Yihui's expressions were also very serious. Chang Yihui's duty was the most suitable to express his position. He didn't delay and spoke a few seconds later. I'll immediately report the relevant situation to Sir Tang. Given the current situation, I believe that everyone should meet to exchange opinions and respond to the following problems in a timely manner. The metal plate on Shi Yuan's cheek seemed to have frozen into his flesh. He didn't speak any further. He just nodded silently. Xingzhan clenched his fist after the two knights reached a consensus. The densely packed display boards directly returned to nothingness, severing the last hope of certain people to listen to the lecture. Xingzhan spoke to Chang Yihui at this time. We might need to make some major adjustments in the maintenance and repair work. Pull out some people. Chang Yihui declined to comment. He just said, we'll talk after we meet. Then he turned around and left with quick steps. The troops behind him split apart, forming a passageway for the few big shots to leave. A personal guard like Lu Andy naturally had to leave with Shi Yuan. Before he left, he even gestured to Liang Lu, Luo Nan, and Zhan Xiao, who had inexplicably gone from being the center of attention to being ignored. It could be considered a farewell. However, Luo Nan was able to see that a layer of haze had faintly accumulated on the peak of this mature and steady officer's brows. Even his candid smile was unable to conceal it. Soon, the two knights and their entourage left without a trace. Luo Nan turned around and looked at the contaminated area that was beginning to be treated. So far, he could be considered to have come into close contact with the evil and poisonous environment. He felt the chaotic yet moving towards chaos, the internal irritation yet no obvious internal friction. But was he infected by Liang Lu with this inexplicable sense of familiarity? And at this time, Luo Nan heard Liang Lu murmur, "This is really bad." Luo Nan nodded, "It really is bad." Liang Lu was startled. He raised his head to look at Luo Nan. "You know that model. Do you learn it in the general level? If it's the one that Officer Xingzhan was referring to, then no." Luo Nan denied it. He really didn't know what the model was, but he followed his own logic in deducing forward. He picked out the details bit by bit, cross-verified them, and eliminated the correct options. The final remaining link, no matter how absurd it seemed in common sense, was definitely problematic. After experiencing the evil and poisonous environment up close, Luo Nan was able to deduce it from a more fundamental configuration theory. He had the confidence to conclude that he had executed the entire process from the discovery of the contaminated area to the cutting process. His judgment was accurate, and there were no mistakes at all. There were no problems with the link he led. Then the problem was not with the part that belonged to him. Yes, Luo Nan was referring to the blessing of cleaning and patching after the cutting process was completed. The problem was the jade crystal array. Liang Lu was unable to grasp Luo Nan's reasoning for a time, but he didn't have the mood to delve into it. In reality, he just had a deep impression of the data model of the jade crystal array. He forcefully guessed it from the words and actions of Officer Xingzhan and the others. His train of thought was far from being clear. His train of thought was simply cut off by Luo Nan's interruption. He circled back. "What's going on? Is it a malfunction, or?" "It's the contamination." The one who spoke was Zhan Xiao. And right now, he was surrounded by the members of the Jingming agency. He crossed the quarantine area and walked to the vicinity of Luo Nan and Liang Lu. Perhaps it was the opposite of what happened when things reached an extreme. This member of the imperial family had suffered from a bad evaluation and neglect within a short few minutes. Not only did he not collapse, but he seemed to have calmed down quite a bit. Of course, this didn't mean that he was free. He still had to go to the relevant department to undergo a series of tests and inquiries. The surrounding personnel were simply monitoring and escorting him. Zhang Zhao's footsteps didn't stop. He didn't even turn his head when he spoke his second sentence. I only understood what that fellow did after Officer Xing pointed it out. He twisted the sewage pipe and the drinking water pipe together. Zhang Zhao's analogy wasn't accurate, but it was helpful in understanding.